Hi, everyone. Welcome to this webinar today. We're really happy to be introducing Kay Zenner, Head of Office and Digital Policy Advisor for MEP Axel Voss, which is the European People's Party group in the European Parliament, on the concept of AI Act and its practical application. My name is Julie, and I'm working as a product manager at DataScientest. Just a couple of words. We're a training institute specializing in, you guessed it, analytics and data science. Now, before we start off things, just a quick reminder that you can always ask your questions, whatever your platform you're on, whether it to be LinkedIn or YouTube, and don't hesitate to challenge us and ask plenty of questions that we'll be able to showcase at the end. Throughout the journey, I'll be the host here, but without further ado, let me introduce Kay Zenner to the scene and hand the floor over to you, Kay.
Yes, thank you very much for the invitation, and yeah, happy to be here. Unfortunately, we had a few technical problems, therefore I cannot show any slides. So what I will do is just give you yeah, a quick overview of what is currently the situation with the European AI Act, what are now the next steps, and so on and so on, and then leave the floor open for any kind of questions. As you have probably seen in the newspapers, there was a lot of talk about yeah, votes in the European Parliament on the AI Act among the member states and so on and so on. And those who have followed it a little bit are maybe a little bit confused that you are hearing now the AI Act will be adopted, will be voted on for yeah, almost 4 or 5 months, and it's continuing to happen. This is the case because there was a political agreement on the 6th of or 8th of December last year. Then there were technical negotiations that have been continuing until the mid or end of January. And then there was a first vote in the European Parliament on committee level in February. Also, the member states voted on it. Then it went back to the lawyer linguists and the legal service. They also improved the text, and this improved version was now voted on last week on Thursday, finally in the European Parliament. And yeah, basically the next days, the member states, the ministers will vote also finally on the AI Act, and then basically every week it could happen that it will be officially published in the yeah, EU journal, and by that, after 20 days, entering into force. Maybe a quick overview of the AI Act and what is special about it. First of all, you also maybe read in the news that the European AI Act is another big digital law coming from Brussels, maybe over-regulating and so on and so on. This argument or the statement is not completely fair because the AI Act is not an invention of the European Union to hamper innovation or similar things. No, it's really going back to yeah, a lot of international, especially prep work. For example, in the OECD, G7, G20 have been working on it, UNESCO, the United Nations per se, and also standardization bodies in the world like ISO, IEEE, but also on European levels. There was the high-level expert group from the European Commission. There were a lot of other smaller expert groups. The European Parliament published reports, own initiative reports, and by doing that, they wanted to push the Commission for making a legal proposal. And also in member states, there have been expert groups working on it. In Germany, the Datenethikkommission and the German Parliament as well worked on AI. So what you can see, it's really a long line of yeah, prep work of international, European, and national cooperation. And it's all going back to realization among policymakers across the world that maybe not let's say, simple AI systems that are around for many decades are leading to a necessity to regulate AI, but those newer AI systems, in particular machine learning, deep learning, because those systems have created some kind of legal gap in the existing legal frameworks. Think about a drone that is flying around autonomously, or to a certain extent at least, and then is crashing on the head of a person which is walking over a square. In some member states, those cases are maybe completely covered when it's coming to liability, but not in all of them. Many of European countries, for example, in Germany, there are at least some doubts if every of these cases would be covered by the existing liability law, or if not, the opacity, complexity, and so on of this new AI technologies within the drone is leading to legal uncertainty, and maybe in the end even to a situation where the harmed person, this person who had the drone crashed on his or her head, would be there without any liability claims. This is now only an example on liability, but also in other areas, policymakers worldwide were identifying certain gaps. And based on this realization that there are gaps and that there are maybe also new risks by AI, those international organizations that I was talking about are now working for almost 10, 15 years on the question how to regulate or how to do AI policy. One organization that was in particular very, very, very strong on it is the OECD. And the OECD published in 2019 some AI principles, for example, human oversight, transparency, and so on and so on. And what is now interesting to see, and now I'm going back to my original comment that, this statement, there's another digital law coming from the European Union and so on, is maybe a bit too simple, because those principles that have been established internationally by organizations like the OECD can now be found in a lot of different AI policy approaches. For example, a policy approach that is leading to a regulatory reply or response like the European AI Act, so a horizontal legislative piece, but also laws or regulatory approaches like in the United States with the executive order, or even non-binding guidelines like you can see them in Singapore. So no matter how different countries have decided to regulate artificial intelligence or to face artificial intelligence, the basic principles that they have used in their AI policies are again rather similar, which will in the end help to align countries and regions again, meaning that, for example, a European company that wants to sell in the United States will find a situation that, again, is not so different from what this company is finding here in the European Union. If we are now looking a little bit further in the European AI Act, and after I talk now about similarities across the globe, I will point out 3 points that are indeed maybe a bit special when it comes to regulate artificial intelligence, and really shows that the European Union here wanted to create a so-called third way on artificial intelligence, so really bringing something new on the table. First of all, they did it by using something that is rather standard in the European Union, meaning internal market legislation, and there in particular product safety legislation. It's called in Brussels New Legislative Framework. And this kind of laws, they are putting out a list of minimum criteria that you need to fulfill in order to bring your product on the market, to place it on the market. Think about a vacuumer, a toy, a washing machine, and so on. So those technologies need to fulfill or reach certain minimum criteria, as I just said. And if they do, will be basically assessed by third-party conformity assessments, or in some cases internal conformity assessment by those companies. But there will be also afterwards, after the system is on the market, there will be checks by the Market Surveillance Authority and so on. This approach was in the past quite successful, and the Commission was thinking, if we are using this approach now also for artificial intelligence, it's something that companies are already used to, that doesn't create a lot of problems, and maybe to almost no extent would hamper innovation. The problem a little bit with using this approach is that it's not 100% fitting for artificial intelligence, because there are some elements that are typical for this approach, like substantial modification, that is not really being triggered by a washing machine or a vacuumer, because such a product is not really changing. But AI is called evolving system or evolving technology for a reason, because based on new input data, for example, there is a chance that new capabilities are being developed or are being trained to this new AI technology. So we don't really know if this product safety legislation approach is really legally fitting. And on top, the European Commission also combined it with fundamental rights protection. And this is critical because of a very similar point. The product safety ecosystem, if I can call it like this, do not have or doesn't have any experience with protecting fundamental rights. I do understand why the Commission combined both, because artificial intelligence, because it's deployed so broadly in every sector, in every use case, it does tackle or does influence certain fundamental rights, at least in some use cases. Think about discrimination, think about other points, and therefore it would not really be complete if you don't include fundamental rights protection. But as I said, again, the jury is out if this is working, and if those existing product safety structures are able to fulfill all those new obligations and to tackle these special needs and demands from AI as a technology. A second point is that the European AI Act is based on a risk-based approach. I said that the 3 points that I will now mentioning are a little bit different to international AI policies. With the risk-based approach, it's not 100% true, because you find it also here and there in some other regions, but I would say the European Union has the most sophisticated one. We have 4 categories: prohibited AI systems, we have high-risk AI systems, we have those AI systems that demand some additional transparency obligations, and we have the 4th level of risk, which is no risk or minimal risk. And this 4th level would not face now any new obligations from the AI Act. The 3rd level, the transparency obligations, would only face rather minor, as I said, disclosure measures that that the company or researcher, so the developer of an AI system, needs to fulfill. And the music in the AI Act really plays when it comes to the prohibitions, the first level, and the second level, the high-risk obligations. The risk-based approach in principle is similar to product safety, a very good idea because it also makes sure that the AI field is not over-regulated and that basically only those systems that are really posing a risk would in the end face new obligations. The problem is that while in theory it's good, the European Union didn't really make a proper impact assessment and trying to find out how many systems are falling in all of those categories. So also there, the jury is out, and we will see if it's really a pyramid that basically is having almost no prohibited AI systems and a lot of non-risk, unregulated AI system, or if it's the other way around, so a top-down pyramid. The third very unique European approach is a value chain strategy that the European Parliament further strengthened in the political negotiations. Because going back to the product safety approach was really focused on those companies that are placing a system on the market or putting it into service, or those that are deploying the AI system, we found in the parliament that it would not really be fair that those companies are covering all the obligations and need to invest a lot of money in getting compliant. And we wanted to counterbalance a little bit or counter effect this a little bit by also including other actors within the AI value chain in the AI Act. Our biggest goal was actually to make sure that from upstream companies, so those companies that are developing, for example, models or data sets or something like that, that are then later being used in the downstream, for example, high-risk AI system in the employment sector, that those companies are sending all the necessary information and assistance to the companies down the value chain that are, again, facing the main obligations of the AI Act. A second point that we also included is that especially those model developers that have a very, very unique and powerful position in the AI value chain are making, to a certain extent, as much as it's possible, sure that their model are already adhering to certain principles of the AI Act, again, with the idea to making it easier for downstream actors that are using the models to, in the end, becoming compliant. Those 3 points were, as I said, compared globally, rather unique if you are addressing AI. And as I said already, the whole idea of the European Union with the European AI Act was to create another Brussels effect, so a third way on how to address AI, new developments, new risks, new opportunities, and the end goal was to really enable European companies to develop trustworthy AI systems that, based on those principles that are beyond or behind the AI Act, can then be sold all over the world and creating a big competitive advantage for European companies. Behind this assessment or this objective is a little bit the realization that China and the United States are far ahead when it's about venture capital, when it's about investments per se, when it's about digital skills or bringing research into the business field and commercializing inventions from the research sector and so on. And therefore, the European Union was thinking, okay, if we are lacking there behind, let's try to enable this competitive edge via this kind of special type of regulation that in the end is creating those trustworthy AI systems across Europe. While this is a nice idea in principle, it's a little bit at risk via some of those, and I mentioned it already, negative points when it comes to the AI Act. I mentioned already this kind of uncertainty if the AI Act is working with its product safety approach. I mentioned already the lack of evidence, lack of evaluation when it comes to, for example, the number of AI systems that will be classified as high risk or as forbidden. And also, there are other parts in the AI Act that are rather vague, where it's not really clear what is being meant. For example, if you are reading the definitions in Article 3, you are often thinking, okay, and what does it mean? If you are reading the prohibition on social scoring, many companies are saying, well, if I would interpret it very, very strict, I could fall under it, but no one really knows if this company does fall under it or not. There are the same problems in the high risk area, where it's also quite unclear if you are high risk or not. The long-standing problem of access to high quality data sets and also how to do a proper data training was not really solved in the European Union and in the AI Act. There is a huge problem when it comes to copyright protected content, to personal data that is being processed in this type of training of your AI system. And companies also there face rather huge legal uncertainty. And even if they want to play by the rules, currently it's not really clear how to do it. So the negative points are really, let's summarize them with legal uncertainty. So the AI Act was meant in a rather good way, again, to enable trustworthy AI coming from the European Union. But this big issue is that the Act right now, at least, is not clear enough. The good news is, and this is now the final point from my first presentation before we are coming to the question, that there are also quite positive elements in the AI Act. And especially if you compare it to previous digital pieces of legislation coming from the European Union, there is this attempt to make the AI Act much more future-proof. We wanted to really create a dynamic piece of legislation that is being able to adjust over time. Compared, for example, to data protection laws, for example, the GDPR, which is now unchanged since 2016, the AI Act will facilitate or create a lot of secondary legislation. For example, guidelines, delegated acts, implementing acts, and so on and so on. There's also harmonized technical standards that will be used to further specify all those obligations in the AI Act. And in the end, should create a situation where companies have a rather easy and cheap way to show compliance, because they basically just need to follow those technical standards in the way they are designing their AI system. There are also amplified possibilities for companies in the future to jump in, to participate in how those secondary legislation is being created. There is an advisory forum, there's a scientific panel, there is this new concept, at least in digital laws, of regulatory sandboxes and so on. And all of that has this idea that companies and researchers and enforcement bodies and so on are coming together, are entering a kind of regulatory dialogue and learn together how to best comply with the AI Act. So you can really argue that the AI Act, if it's now finally being printed and published in the official EU journal, is of course a major step, but really not the end of the road. It's basically just now, maybe midterm, and now it's all about making the AI governance system work and adding a lot of new pieces that are further specifying how the AI Act should be understood. And companies, I think, have now a huge role, but also huge responsibility, because without them, it doesn't really work. Without all their expertise and experience, the enforcement bodies on European level, like the European Commission, but especially on national level, will not be really able to make good calls what to do now with AI, where to enforce, what is really risky, and so on. I think they really require good exchanges with the real specialists coming from academia, coming from companies, and learn again with them what are the best strategies, what are best practices that are already quite well working, and so on. And I think here, I indicated it already, is a huge chance for those companies and also research associations or communities to engage early with the regulator, with the enforcers. And I think that those enforcers will be quite happy to receive good input, and also will be kind of grateful. They will know, for us at the moment, we are feeling a little bit like a startup, for example, as let's say a Danish enforcement body, but Company X and University Z were helping us quite a lot at the very beginning, and maybe they are then also showing more flexibility or more understanding when those actors are in the future creating also a new AI system that they will then test or supervise or something else. It's also crucial that companies become active in order to make sure that those secondary legislations that I was talking about, and also the harmonized standards, are really reflecting the wide field of AI. It should not be the case that only a few companies are dominant and are sharing their experience, because this, of course, gives just a very small perspective of what AI really is. So to summarize, basically here for companies, again, those that are active already now or in the next months will really benefit, because they will be much more able to be compliant. They will be able to use those close connections with the public authorities. And I think also those companies that are working together with other companies in networks like trade associations, like research networks that you can now find in France and in Germany more and more, where companies are working together on certain initiatives and projects and so on. All those approaches are a really good idea to make sure that you are in the end becoming compliant, that you understand the AI Act in the right way. Because yeah, if 5 or 10 or even 100 companies have the same idea like you, it's very, very, very likely that in the end, by doing that, you are getting compliant. So maybe here I would stop and we can continue then the discussion via Q&A. But for me, it was really important, yeah, to give you a broad picture, basically, of what was being envisioned with the AI Act, what the problems are, but also now how you particular can try to be a little bit in front of the curve and yeah, make the best out of a situation where there is, as a downside, quite a lot of legal uncertainty, and it will take quite a lot of time until this very, very complicated AI governance system is fully in place.
Thank you very much, Kai. That was super, super interesting. Thanks for the time. So I see we have some questions already. I believe you have answered some of them. But when will the act be published and in place? Is there a date to be kick off for the companies to become compliant with the deadlines?
Yes. So as I indicated, the publication should now happen after the final vote from the council, from the ministries, because there is a strong push for this to happen in front of the European election, which is on the 9th of June. I think it could happen somewhere in May, or maybe in the first week of June, to the latest in July. But if I would need to bet, I would say May or early June. I think you are muted.
Sorry, yes, thank you. So yeah, so we need to be prepared because it's coming very soon. So we have another question. You mentioned the classification of AI based on risk classes. I understand that this classification is regulatory, but I got the impression from the examples given that it mainly depends on the context.
Yes, so on the risk classes, it's actually one of the criticisms that you hear quite often towards the AI Act, because it's indeed not really clear why those examples are listed, for example, under the prohibitions in Article 5 or Annex 3, where the high-risk use cases are listed. It seems a little bit that yeah, the Commission made their, let's say, a first reading and didn't really look into concrete data if, for example, this is more like a science fiction debate or yeah, future developments on AI, or if it's really AI that is being used right now already. There's, for example, one point in paragraph 6 of Annex 3, which is about lie detectors in migration circumstances or in law enforcement circumstances. And we were actually checking quite a lot if AI lie detectors are already used on a broad scale, and we didn't find anything. And also newspapers in Germany made this exercise. And this you can also say about other points, for example, social scoring again. The Commission very likely had the social scoring field test in China in mind, which was, again, still a test. Of course, they are implementing it here and there, but it's not there yet, and still it's in the prohibitions, and it's rather broadly formulated, which could have the downside that certain commercially fully allowed products or services are certainly facing a ban. So to your question, yeah, when it's about the classification in risk classes, as I also said in my presentation, the evidence is a little bit lacking, and we will see if those use cases are really representing the reality. And on the context point, the context of use is, however, now we added in Article 8, which is a kind of umbrella article that is, let's say, introducing in the system of high-risk obligations. So, for example, how you need to do data governance, how you need to do human oversight, and so on and so on. In the original Commission proposal, the context of use was not relevant. And we now in the Parliament and with the member states changed that. So now basically the context of the specific use really needs to be taken into account, and decides how much and to which extent you as a provider of a high-risk AI system needs to fulfill those obligations.
Great, thank you. So we have another question. What happens to a company if they do not reach compliance in terms of fines?
Yes, so there is maybe good news. I say maybe because it depends a little bit on the enforcement bodies. But in the GDPR, it was, well, at least in Germany, always a major concern because everyone was speaking about those maximum fines, and especially smaller companies were sometimes even saying, okay, no, the risk is too high to really invest in, for example, a big data application back then in 2016 or 18. In the AI Act, there's a similar list of fines. The fines are actually even higher now, I think, because they changed the numbering of the articles. I think it's now Article 99. It was Article 71 before. And if you read it, you will see that, for example, if you are violating a prohibition in Article 5, so for example, using an AI system for social scoring, you could face a fine of 7% of your global income, or I think 35 million, whichever is higher, whichever amount is higher. But again, this is a maximum. And what we added now, and where we are much stronger compared to the GDPR, is that enforcement bodies do not need to issue fines. They can also issue a warning. They can first reach out to those companies and try to make it work. And this hopefully will help, especially at the very beginning, where we have all those legal uncertainty and maybe many companies cannot really fulfill the AI Act, that then the enforcement bodies are showing a little bit more, let's say, flexibility and willingness to help and understanding better. So at least in the AI Act, we gave them these opportunities and possibilities, but now it really depends on the specific enforcement bodies, and especially in Germany, we have, of course, with the data protection authorities, a really mixed picture, because some of them are super strict and some of them are not so strict, and this leads to a kind of fragmentation when it comes to GDPR enforcement within Germany. This could actually again happen also with the AI Act, even though we also installed their safeguards. But yeah, this maybe goes now a bit too deep in this special topic.
Yeah, thank you. And who will give guidance on the vague definition of forbidden on the right high-risk AI systems?
Good question. So this is Article 96. It's the European Commission You can check this article. There's a list of points they need to provide guidelines on or guidance on. For example, what I talked already about, what is a substantial modification, what is an AI system, what is forbidden, what should be understood, for example, at social scoring and so on. And in Article 6, paragraph 3, there's a similar provision that obliges the European Commission to provide guidelines what a high-risk AI system is and what not. Because I pushed this text in there, if the Commission follows what I asked them to do, is they would really create a kind of table where on the left side is a system that is not classified as high risk, and on the right side another system that is classified as high risk, and both of them, for example, from the critical infrastructure section, which is Annex 3.2. But yeah, it depends on the Commission how to do it, when to do it. Yeah, there we are a little bit disappointed because there's not a concrete timing or deadline they need to fulfill. So we can only hope that it's coming fast.
Thanks. And we have a question that is pretty similar. But will there be something like a guide or specification, or will every company have to interpret the AI Act themselves?
Yeah, at the beginning, unfortunately, this is the case because, as I said, the AI Act on top is also quite vague, and therefore there will be different interpretations, also depending on the culture, on the background, on the nationality, on your sector, and so on and so on. And this is why it's so important that now the public sector and the private sector are really working closely together to make it all a bit better understandable and clearer. There will be those guidelines, as I said. The Commission will also do delegated acts, implementing acts. There will be technical standards from Zenner that are also specifying how to, for example, do data governance, how to write down a technical documentation. But yeah, what is unclear if also national competent authorities, so national enforcement bodies, will do the same, which could be helpful. For example, I hear that Spain is right now working on a template how to protect copyright if you are doing data training or training of your model or system. If this then becomes a best practice and it's basically used all over Europe, it would be good. If not, it would lead to fragmentation. Then you have different rules again in Germany, Spain, France, and so on. So yeah, we will see.
Great, thank you. So next question, what will be the status of an AI that is trying to predict if their AI is high risk or not according to the EU AI Act? Basically, an AI to predict the classification of AI.
So this would be basically no risk right now. So if you want to do something on that, feel free. As there are actually a few startups that are trying to do it already. And honestly, I think because the AI Act is not the only digital piece of legislation coming from the European Union, and we have in November last year we had already 116 laws that are adopted or planned. So it's a lot which is coming, and honestly, I don't see how we will manage to do it properly without the help of AI. So I really think this is a kind of business area where maybe startups could become very interested in and active in.
Very nice. So there's a big area of opportunity, potentially. Okay, I believe this was the last question. So thank you again, Kai. We have a next question. Why are there no penal actions against the people who are responsible for the failure, even if it's shown on the act that was modified?
Yeah, so in the AI Act again, because it's a typical product safety piece of legislation, the target of let's say fines of any enforcement activities are always companies. So those actors basically bring the product or service on the market, placing it on the market, putting it on the servers, into servers, and so on. The individual, well, in Germany, for example, we don't have a criminal law for businesses or for CEOs and so on. I don't know how it's looking across Europe. Maybe in some member states this is possible. Then it would kind of be national lex specialis, which could complement the AI Act. What from the European area is coming on top is, of course, product liability directive, and maybe in the future also the AI liability directive. Currently, it's on hold because it was just too much out there with product liability directive and with AI Act. So we didn't want to do now also a third act. But yeah, maybe the third act, now that PLD and AI Act are being adopted, could basically address this issue of individual fault behind a harm, for example, or if a certain person, for example, was misusing an AI system, was coding it intentionally wrong, and so on and so on. But honestly, in many countries, I think the criminal law in those cases would already be sufficient. So we as regulators on the EU level will definitely have an in-depth look into it. But yeah, at the moment, it looks like there are only a few very specific gaps, because the rest can still or already be handled by existing legislation.
Great. So next question: what are the government element companies? What are the governance element companies have to implement beyond having to make it the AI compliant on the technical level?
Yeah, it's a good question. So there you can basically look from Article 16 and following. In Article 16, there are a lot of points that companies need to do. As you said, the technical level basically is represented by Article 8 to 15, where it's all about risk assessment, technical documentation, transparency, cybersecurity, and so on and so on. While then in 16 and following, there are articles that are about, okay, when you need to do a third-party conformity assessment with a notified body, in Germany, for example, TÜV or DEKRA. When do you need, or how do you need to ask for a CE marking that you put on your product, which is again typical for product safety legislation? When do you need to monitor, or how do you need to monitor a system after you are placing it on the market? It's around Article or former Article 60, I think it's now Article 70. Again, with the new numbering, I'm still struggling after working with the old one for many, many years. And there are also other points that you, for example, need to register your AI system in a high-risk database. You need to take it off the market. If there is a severe incident, you need to notify authorities if such incident happens, and so on. So you see that there are indeed a lot of governance elements that companies need to take into account and need to prepare for, because after placing the product off the market, they still have a lot of obligations. So until then, they need to fulfill all those technical things. But even though there is not a concrete, let's call it know your customer principle in the AI Act, there are still quite a lot of monitoring and awareness obligations. Maybe I can describe them like that a company needs to fulfill.
Great. And from what I understand, this regulation is intended for private companies. Does it take into account AI governed by European states?
Yes, also a good question. Indeed, I was always talking about companies. Sorry for that, because they were always in the focus of our main discussions. But no, it's also for public authorities. I indicated it already when I was talking about migration and law enforcement agencies and so on and so on. Actually, those players have it even harder because we removed certain obligations for private actors slash companies. For example, they don't need to do as a deployer of a high-risk AI system to execute a fundamental rights impact assessment. The political majority in the end said that fundamental rights impact assessment only needs to be done um, from public authorities or entities that are doing a task on their behalf. So, for example, a private security company or something like this. And there are also other parts in the AI Act where those public actors need to fulfill additional things, for example, in the technical documentation, or if they are using remote biometrical identification, so for example, facial recognition. Again, with law enforcement, they need to ask for a judicial approval and so on and so on. So especially if you look in Article 5, the prohibitions and the user obligations, let me think, I think it's now Article 27, if I'm not mistaken, or 28, then the fundamental right impact assessment. There you find quite a lot for public authorities.
Perfect, thank you. And I think this time there was the last question. So thank you so much again. That was super, super interesting. I think everyone learned a lot today. So before we close, do you have any last words you'd like to say?
Yes, maybe because I'm sometimes rather critical when it's about the AI Act, as someone who worked on it now for, yeah, let's say with the prep work for almost 6 years. I do, yeah, I'm sad that certain mistakes have been done and certain things that were rather easy to avoid still made it in the text. But I think people like me, and especially people who are not so closely connected to this piece of legislation, should now really focus on making it work. So it's all, we should stop to complain, especially myself, and now really address the issue of yeah, building up a good working, well working ecosystem of AI trust and excellence, and really creating this kind of trustworthy AI coming from the European Union, where at least certain principles are being followed and implemented in the design of AI system. It will be all about the question to do that in a rather easy way that is not so expensive or complicated that almost no company can fulfill it. But again, to be able to do that or to enable that, I think we all need to work together. And I think companies and AI developers and deployers need to make a lot of pressure towards the European Union and towards the national member states that they are recognizing that certain things are maybe not possible immediately to fulfill. And I think we all of us should show a little bit understanding and flexibility, that you cannot have a 100% implementation from day one.
Sounds good. So thanks again. I think we will close. To make sure that you do not miss any of our next videos, please make sure to follow Data Scientist and Data Scientist Germany as well. And on that note, thanks again, Kai, and we'll see you next
Thank you.
time.